that is an example of one of the Amp Designer patches inside Logic. This specific one is emulating the brown tone that Eddie Van Halen really made popular, in the process killing a bunch of people's amps. We can talk about that a little later, but this tool, which we're going to explore, is just so deep and has so many options that probably you weren't even aware of, and might not be aware of which specific amps and things like that they're modeling, and that's what we're going to show you. Okay, so how we're going to divide this up, because there's a lot of different combinations inside the Amp Designer. And we're going to break this up kind of like the manual does, which is a little different order in some ways than what's actually in the plugin. And we're going to just go down the row. We're going to kind of go through this part quickly because there's so much to it. But just realize that there's an actual whole section of the manual dedicated to this if you need to figure out which of these is right for which task you're using it. And then what we're going to do is talk about some of the other tools and things that are in here. We're going to look at a lot of the amps which are similar in real life to the ones inside this specific plugin. I found a bunch of resources online. There was a wiki that had a number, but I didn't agree with all of them. And I found that in every single case, that not everyone seemed to really know all of the options. And so I did my own comparison and tried to figure out which ones were which as closely as possible. And it's not going to be 100% accurate, just because a couple of them are so different. And you're going to be able to get some real world equivalents, but we're not going to be able to know that without actually talking to someone at some point. So the first category would be the Tweed Combos. We have the small Tweed Combo, which is this. And these three that are in this first section are like 50s and 60s, the birth of rock and roll, country, blues. And so they're really the sound of some of that from that era. And this first one, which is a 1x12, is very similar to the Tweed Fender Deluxe. A nice little small combo amp that's amazing. The second one would be the large Tweed Combo, and it just packs it into essentially what we're looking at is a 4x10. And that's very similar to the Fender Bassman, which is definitely the bigger of the first two, and another really great example of one of those vintage setups that we could use. And then the last one is the mini Tweed Combo, which is a 1x10 and very similar to the Fender Champ. You can tell that they're not only similar in how they look, because they are designed to model after those original instruments, but they're also designed to sound like them. So between the two things, I think it's really interesting to be a little bit more aware of which of these original setups, these different speaker configurations and all of that we're looking at. The next group would be the classic American combos. In this one, we have 5 different options. And these are really more inspired by the combos of the 1960s. So we've moved ahead a couple decades. And, you can read all about the different options here. But the first one would be the large black panel combo. The black panel is talking about the section where the knobs are. There's like the black section. You could tell a lot about which model and instrument or amp you were using based on some of these key identifiers. And so here's, for instance, the Fender Blackface Super Reverb. And that, it's pretty close. It's definitely aimed in that direction. The next one would be the silver panel combo, which is in many ways really close to the twin reverb, the Silverface twin reverb. And then we had the mini black panel combo, which is remarkably similar to the Princeton reverb. Not bad. And then we had the small brown panel combo, which, this one, I had a number of people had a few different ones that they thought it was similar to, but in the end I kind of am leaning towards the Vibrolux, which had a lot of key similarities. Then we had the Blues Blaster combo, which is very similar to the Fender Vibrosonic. So you can see all of these different rigs that were released over the years. We have access to the different characteristics. Are they exactly the same? Of course not, but they're going to give you a lot of the same characteristics in the tonal palette in your toolkit. Next, we have British stacks. These were based on the 50 and 100 watt amplifier heads that have largely defined the sound of heavy rock. You're going to recognize some of these for sure. We have 3 that fit into this category, and this is like the 1960s, 80s, and even into the 90s. The first one being the vintage British stack, which looks, I mean, you might be surprised how close it looks, but Marshall Plexi 45. And then we had another Marshall here. This is the modern British stack, which is like the JCM 800. I mean, they're getting this down, going back a little bit now, to where the lines are, the actual graphics, which makes some of the later ones extra confusing because, well, you'll see. And then the last one is similar to the previous Marshall, but this is not necessarily, we don't have a brown Marshall exactly that looks like this. This is more homage to the brown sound from someone like Eddie Van Halen, among others, who and this specific one emulates the modification used in the Variac, which is a voltage. Well, it lowers the voltage, so you get a much different sound with how the electronics play together as they're going through the amp into the speaker. Originally, Eddie Van Halen was telling people that he was actually turning up the voltage, which, when you do that, it destroys your gear. And so there were hundreds, if not more, of people who were turning up their voltages to emulate Eddie Van Halen's sound and ended up destroying their equipment. And he later actually apologized for that. It's one of those things where once you turn it down, you actually have a different sound, and things distort differently, things amplify differently, and so you come up with this really distinct sound, the brown sound, and it's something that we can do in here with this particular instrument. Next, we have the British combos. There's 4 of them. We have the British Blues, British Combo, Small British Combo, and the Boutique British Combo. First one of them here is very similar. I don't have a great picture, but it's similar to the Marshall Blues Breaker in size and sound quality. The next thing we had was the British Combo, which has a very distinct look with the Vox AC30. It's very probably unmistakably modeled off of that particular amp. Then we have this one, the Small British Combo, which is, I think, a little bit more rare. You don't see these quite as often around, but this is the Vox AC15. Most people that I know really go after the AC30, but this is a nice change up to that same type of sound. And then we have the Boutique British Combo, which is undoubtedly modeled off of something like the Matchless DC30. Really cool look. The next group, the British Alternatives. The Sunshine Rack, you'll never guess which one that is based off of, orange. The Small Sunshine Combo, Stadium Stack, and a Stadium Combo. Obviously, there's no mincing which one that these first 2 are modeled off of. The Orange AD30, it's not exact, but if it's not the AD30, it's certainly something very similar. And then the Small Sunshine Combo is something like the Tiny Terror or something like that. And then we had the Stadium Stack. And I read a few different options for this. All of them were the high watts, as you can see, going from here to this. This one is the high watt. It's a custom high watt 100. And, there are some other models it could be, but it's certainly off of the high watt type of sound. And then this one here, the Stadium Combo, I read a few different models that people thought it were, but only a couple of them look like this. This is the custom high watt 50. So you get the idea. They're high watts. The next were the metal stacks. And then we had the modern American, this one right here. And I mean, look at what this one is modeled off of. I mean, going back and forth, there's no question. This, of course, is Mesa Engineering dual rectifier. And awesome sound. The next two, we get into the territory where they're not specifically giving us enough information and tell us exactly which one. You could do some sound comparisons probably and narrow it down, but this one, the high octane stack and the turbo stack, they look like they just have different knobs and a different number of tubes inside. But there aren't any out there in the world which actually have that exact pattern cut out, but there are a number of different heads that have the cutout things, like this one right here. And someone like me who doesn't play guitar, I'm sure, says diesel, and there are others who say diesel. It's an awesome looking encasement it has, and it's likely that something like this is what it's based off of, but it's not enough information. There's 2 or 3 others that have similar cutouts on the front, and so it could be any one of those. It's just not clear. You're going to get the typical sound from something like that. Then we have the additional combos. These ones are a little bit out there. They don't all fit into one category. They're all not exactly small, but none of them are huge. This first one is 1x12 studio combo, and there's no doubt in my mind that this is off the Boogie Mark IV. And I mean, look at that front. It's very distinct pattern on there. Direct ripoff. The next one, the Boutique Retro Combo, is not any specific one. There's no amp, as far as I can tell, no combo that looks like that. That looks like the front of a car, or like a old-time jukebox or something. But there's none that look like that. And they even say in here that this is not an old vintage amp that they've modeled this off of. This is one of the new boutique releases which seeks to emulate combinations of different combos from the 1960s. The one company I found which is similar to that is Divided by 13. The only reason I think that it could be that, I'm going back and forth for a second, is because the diamond shape on the actual speakers and the one animated, or the drawn version, and then actually on the actual unit there. And so, it's like I don't know for sure. This would take extensive testing, but in the manual, this does say for Logic that this is an expensive new boutique combo that is seeking to emulate previous ones, and that's exactly what Divided by 13 does. And the only clue there is that little shape on the speaker. Probably to do more, to emulate it more with a company that's currently out there and has a lot of, protected technology. They probably couldn't just go in and do more in terms of just a direct emulation. And in this case, they just went with a really fun design, but it's kind of a 60s throwback. Okay, cool. The next one, the Pawn Shop Combo, not 100%, but it's pretty clear that this one would be something, not exactly in this combination, but a silver tone. The knobs are very similar in the design. The little logo thing is similar. And in this case, it's not attached to the same speaker. This one is a 1x8, and this one is attached to something a lot bigger. But I think it's in that same family. And then the last one is not a combo at all. It's just a clean preamp. This is something that it sends it through, gives you the EQ effects and reverb without coloring the sound whatsoever. Perfect. Okay, so those are all of the source things. What we're going to talk about next is the actual speaker configuration. And we can actually move around microphones and things. But before we get into the mics, and this little thing that's on the screen right now just pops up when you hover over this. So you can actually do mic placement on this. But let's actually talk or show you all of the combinations here, because we can go through and choose any of the first part of the amp, and then we can change what kind of cabinet it's going to. So I could use, one of the Vox front ends and send it to one of the other cabinets and create anything we want. That's the whole thing about an amp designer, is we're not just limited. We get to create. So this starts with the Tweed 1x12. We're going to go up. Here's the middle group of these, and then all the way down. So you have a lot of options in terms of the cabs that you want to attach this to. In the mic placement, we have these microphones. And so we can look at this a little bit more later, but everything is based off an actual microphone. Everything from the U87 on the left from Neumann all the way to the Royer 121 on the right side, and everything in between. I've used almost all of these mics. One of the Sennheisers I haven't used on guitars, but it's all pretty great. You can move these around for an on-axis or an off-axis thing. The one thing I wish we could do is on the U87, on the 414, they have different polar patterns. You can't change those. Everything's a cardioid pattern for that. There's reason sometimes to use other patterns, but we don't get the choice. And then with the Royer 121, you might not know this, but if it's a bidirectional microphone, so figure 8 is the polar pattern, and when you put it up to the rear side within 2 feet or so, it has a brighter sound, and it's something that I use that facing that direction when I'm doing that with guitars. So I wish I had the ability to actually flip that around if I wanted to. Not all of them, you're not going to find yourself changing these that often, but you certainly should at some point change them. And some of the different presets will have them in different starting place for which one is there. Then move them around, see how they sound. You can actually mix your guitar into your mix a little bit better by moving a microphone or changing a microphone, and there you have it. Next, because that's not enough to customize. If you click on the EQ on the faceplate, you can actually change the EQ module out of the amp. So you have British Bright, Vintage, US Classic, Modern, and Boutique. And the manual, if you want to go through all of these, will actually tell you what each of these are really good at doing. So for instance, the Boutique at the bottom, it's like the tone section of a retro modern boutique amp. It excels at precise EQ adjustments, though the tone may be too clean when used with vintage amplifier. So you can go through and read all of those. The modern one is a digital EQ, although honestly they're all digital EQs. All that means is that it's modeled after a specific digital EQ unit popular in the 1980s and 90s. I have my guesses, but each of these really are just kind of different. Then we have the reverb section, and we can go through and see all the different reverbs that we can add into there. So you can do different spring reverbs, and then we have modern and old and new and different eras, etc. So you can go through and really fine tune it. So that takes us back. Let's go back into Logic for a minute. And so all of these things that we've been talking about then are on this interface. Here's the mics right here. And here's how we move it around. Off axis would be over on the right side. On axis would be on the left side here. And then we can change. The model is where you do like the presets, essentially. But we can do like different ones of the amps and different ones of the cabinets right there, and then different mics. Here are the EQs. Here are the reverbs. And then we do have a tremolo or vibrato unit right here, a presence knob, and then a gain knob, a master knob, and another output knob down here. So lots of different things to decompress here. One of the things you can do, because you could use this as a channel strip if you wanted to, in the sense that you could put this on like a vocal or something, pick out some sort of EQ that you like here, change some of that around, put a reverb on here that you want to mess with it. We have a little bit of these other modulation effects, presence, etc., and just use the clean preamp or something along those lines. Or you actually put it through one of the other amps and still do that. But you get a lot of options, and you can use this on more than just guitars. But understanding a little bit about the heritage here, understanding the time period of the style of music you're working in, understanding the roots of what you're doing, could influence the type of amp that you want to put this through. And then instead of just thinking, oh, there's no way that this is going to be as good as the real thing, if you understand exactly all of the pieces of this, then you're going to be able to get this closer to the real thing than if you were just, guessing at what you were doing and not even fully understanding all of the pieces to it. Just to keep things in perspective, there is a whole bass amp designer as well, and there's an entire pedal board, and we're going to look at those in separate videos because this one now is bordering on long, and we want to actually do that justice. So we're going to look at some of those other tools separately. The pedal board especially has a lot of really cool features, not just in terms of setting everything up, but the actual foot pedals themselves. And so we want to look at those and how we can do that. So that the pedal board will be part 3, and then the bass amp designer will be part 4. The last thing I want to end with is something cool that you may or may not know about. And I'm looking up because I've got part of this on my second monitor up above me. But with our Space Designer Reverb, we can actually come through, and under our presets, we have speakers. We have a bunch of things. We actually have analog circuits, but we have these speakers here. We have amp cabinets, so you can actually come through these, and then some other things down below. So you can actually emulate, or have been emulated, some additional amps and other things that relate to this that we can put this through. And so we can actually, if we want additional options, we can use this instead of the amp designer and come up with some interesting things. So just one other place that we have some of this amp emulation involved with it. Last but not least, we can, if you're really dying for this, hold down the Option key when you click on your key, when you go into the plugins, and we have Guitar Amp Pro. This was the original badass guitar amp emulator. It never really was that great. It's still interesting, but it was never like amazing. So we have mic position, 2 different types of microphones, and a number of different amps, EQs, and speakers. I'm imagining some of this technology went into the new one in a more refined way, or they just started from scratch, but this is still here, and you can still use it if you're looking for something that sounds even worse than all the other options. That's always something here for you. Okay, that's it with this part 2 of how to make guitars sound good in Logic. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be doing another video probably sometime in 2023 or 2024. Just kidding. Talk to you later.